Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by FreshBooks and Eero. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is my co-host, Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hey, John. Happy macOS Mojave release day.
Yay! The last week has been a little rugged. You know, the one thing that drives me nuts about this time of year is that at least the last, I don't know if it's just the last 2 years or maybe even it goes back further, but Mojave comes just a little bit after iOS. So I'm kind of involved to some degree in all of the build up to your big iOS review and the things that surround that, the reviews that we're doing, each of us. And then we kind of like get that all out there, and I've still got the Mac OS review to finish. And that's kind of what I've been dealing with for the last week, which I wish I was finished like you were a week ago, but it's gotten there, and I'm happy to have it out there.
So you spent the past week keeping your head down, getting some serious writing done about the new version of macOS, and your review should be launching sometime later today.
Yes.
I think we're going to try to have it up on the site a couple of hours before Mojave should be up on is it going to be on the Mac App Store? I think yes.
So, one of the things about Mojave is that they're moving software updates back into system processes.
Right, where it should be.
Where it should be, which makes a lot of sense. But obviously, you have to get Mojave first, which has that in it. So, yeah, it'll be on the Mac App Store, I think.
All right. So you should look for John's review on Mac Stories later today. There's going to be examples of third-party apps with dark mode. There's going to be all coverage of Safari changes, Finder changes, automation changes. It's going to be pretty cool, I think.
Oh, there's a big section on screenshotting, which is, that's
Very
one of our favorite topics. So we've got that. We've got all sorts of things. All the sneak peek Marzipan apps are in there as well. So yeah, there's a surprising amount of stuff in there for an update that when I think I saw it at WWDC, I really thought because it was so focused on dark mode, I thought, well, this is really more like a new skin on macOS and there's not that much in it. That's not really right. There's actually quite a bit in here, and a lot of it's really productivity oriented and Finder oriented, and I think that readers of Mac Stories will really enjoy discovering some of these new features because they're really handy.
Very nice. So in this week's episode, we're not going to talk about Mac apps yet. Probably we should talk about Mac apps next week. I'm not sure if I'm qualified to talk about Mac apps, but we'll think about it.
We'll figure something out.
This week, we're continuing our coverage of iOS 12 app updates and new apps because we have a lot of ground to cover. We have a long list of apps that we want to share with our listeners. And I want to go first this time because one of the best utilities for writers, for bloggers, released on iOS this year, TextCase, that you reviewed a bunch of times on Mac Stories, and you mentioned it on Club Mac Stories as well, has received, I think with version 1.3, maybe?
Yeah, 1.3.
1.3 support for Siri shortcuts. So now you can capitalize your text or change, in all the formats supported by TextCase via Siri, just by saying a custom phrase to Siri. What's even better, though, is that because shortcuts from the TextCase app show up in the Shortcuts app, you can create custom and longer workflows, or should I say custom shortcuts, to change text and apply the capitalization style that you want, because it works with the clipboard. This is one of the hacks, sort of one of the workarounds that we mentioned last week that I also covered in my iOS 12 review. Developers are using the clipboard as a sort of variable, as a sort of a place where they can store data. And in this case, if you use the TextCase app and if you set up a shortcut, in my case, I set up a shortcut for applying the Chicago Manual of Style kind of capitalization to text. And by combining the get clipboard and copy to clipboard actions, you can set up essentially a routine in shortcuts. You can set up a shortcut as a function that allows you to capitalize text with the Chicago style and use it in other shortcuts. So to give you an example, and there's going to be links to download these shortcuts in the show notes. I can use I updated my publish to WordPress shortcut in a way that instead of using the built-in text capitalization of the Shortcuts app, which does not use the Chicago Manual of Style approach, I am simply invoking the TextCase shortcut as a function using the run shortcut action. And
Right.
in a second, it gives me back a title for an article that I'm about to publish with the correct capitalization. So that's really convenient. And this is an extremely niche and geeky type of app. I don't know why you want to use it if you don't publish it on the web. I guess it may be convenient to, if you're doing some kind of academic writing, maybe you need to capitalize something, or if you want to apply the SpongeBob capitalization
Yeah,
to
it
text.
also has URL encoding and decoding, which can be handy for people.
That can
using
be
it,
that can be handy, right? So this has become one of my must-have utilities this year, because I really care about having the correct capitalization on Mac Stories.
I know you
Great.
do.
Yeah, it works great, and it integrates with shortcuts. So that would be my first pick.
Yeah, I think what's really cool about Text Case is that it's a good example, because it's a niche kind of utility, of a way that these single-purpose utilities can surface themselves throughout the system and make themselves more useful as a result. The ability to use that as a function and put it in whatever workflow you come up with is a great thing. And we should mention too, it's not just the Chicago Manual style. There are 4 different style guide types you can choose from here. I think it's got the AP style guide and a couple of others as well, but Chicago Manual style is what we use, so that's the one that we care about the most. For my first pick today, I want to talk a little bit about Streaks, and Streaks is my favorite habit-forming task manager kind of app. I mean, it's an interesting app because it sits kind of between task managers and health and fitness in a way, and wellness type of apps, because the whole idea is you want to create a streak of some good habit that you want to form, or some bad habit that you want to break. And so, Streaks gives you a total of 12 different habits that you can track. 6 on one side of like a card interface and 6 on the back side. It's beautifully designed. It won an ADA back in the day, and we just got a new version for iOS 12 that does a couple of things. First of all, it brings it to the iPad for the first time, which I think is a fantastic thing. I mean, when you're habit tracking, you're more likely to want to do that, I think, on your phone or your watch, because maybe you're exercising or you're eating a meal and you want to eat healthy, or you're reading a book, things that are more mobile and on the go and you want to get in and out really quickly. But some of those things you might want to do are also on the iPad, whether it's read more or whatever it might be, write more. And so it's great that you can track it on there as well. And then it syncs back to the other devices. There are some new kinds of tasks that were added. There are now timed tasks. So if, for instance, you're trying to learn a new language and you want to study the language 20 minutes a day, you can set up a time task, which then syncs across all your devices. There's some better integration of the health app here. For instance, you can segment drinking more water. So if you want to drink 8 glasses of water a day, you can have 8 little increments instead of just saying, I want to drink 2 liters of water a day, or whatever it is. There's also more nutrition habits that can be tracked that integrate with third-party apps that track nutrition, like calories or protein consumed or sugar consumed, that kind of thing. And then when you get to the Siri shortcuts, for whatever habits you're tracking, you can log them using Siri. And what I like most about this is not just the simple telling Siri that you've completed a particular task for the day. It's like you said with Text Case, you can take multiple of these and you combine them with other actions. So perhaps, you have a meal and you ate a healthy meal and you drank your glass of water for dinner. You can kill 2 birds with one stone by just logging a custom shortcut that takes care of both of those habits in one go. So it's a great update. It's been one of our favorites. We've reviewed it going back all the way to version 2, I think, on Mac Stories. And it's good to see all this new stuff in it.
No, that's very cool. I need to try the multiple health shortcuts in a single custom one. That sounds really cool.
And Federico, just for you can end your day past midnight. I think you can do it. I think you can end your day as late as 3 a.m. So I think that's your outside bedtime.
That's a really nice touch for people who stay up late. And I consider the day to be over at around that time. But most apps treat midnight as the end of the day. So that's very cool.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Eero. The folks at Eero have built the Wi-Fi system you want for your home. A fast, reliable connection in every room, even out in your backyard. The new second-generation Eero includes a third 5 gigahertz radio, making it twice as fast as before. Whatever your Wi-Fi needs, Eero will blanket your entire home in fast, reliable Wi-Fi. It sits flat on any surface. Just plug it into the wall with the included power adapter, and you're ready to connect your Eero to either Ethernet or wirelessly. And they have a tiny Eero beacon. All you need to do is plug it into the wall and expand coverage to any room, so you don't have to move to a different part of the house just to get good internet speed. Having one router just doesn't work anymore. Like light waves, Wi-Fi waves don't travel through walls well. With Eero, you can install an enterprise-grade Wi-Fi system in your home in just a few minutes. I've used the original Eero system in the past, and a couple of months ago, I set up a second-gen system, and it's fantastic. It's faster, the units are smaller, and it's even easier to set up than before. There's a little detail in the iOS app that I love with Eero. It runs a periodic speed test on your network, so you can just drop into the app anytime and make sure everything's running smoothly and quickly, just humming right along. The setup was incredibly fast and easy too. I set up one of the beacons in the hallway between my kids' rooms, and because it has a light on it, it doubles as a night light for the evenings, which is pretty cool. The great thing is, you don't have to wait weeks to get hold of your new dream Wi-Fi setup. You can get free overnight shipping in the US and Canada by visiting Eero.com, and at checkout, select the overnight shipping option and use App Stories to make it free. That's Eero.com with the promo code AppStories for fast, free shipping overnight in the US and Canada. Our thanks to Eero for supporting the show.
I want to mention version 1.5 of Keep It, which is the database / reference manager app that I've been using instead of DevonThink for the past few months, I think since June. It's got an iOS 12 update that adds a bunch of features from the Mac version. So this is one of the areas of focus for the developer, bringing feature parity between Keep It for Mac and Keep It for iOS. So now you have the ability, for example, to mark items as favorite and have like separate views for favorite items and favorite lists, which was previously a Mac-only feature. You can also, you have keyboard shortcuts on iPad, so the app is easier to navigate. But most of all, there's a search has been completely redone. So there's a new engine that allows you to search for content contained in a document. So like a word in a PDF document, or a sentence in a text document, or even something in a web page, because in Keep It you can save web pages offline. So search is more accurate, but most of all, when you search, you will see two things. Inside of a document that matches your query, search results will be highlighted in yellow. That allows you to jump, between multiple occurrences of the same search result. But also above the keyboard, you will see search suggestions. Those allow you to build a complex search in just a few taps. So you can do things like name contains iOS 12, folder is Mac Stories, created in the past week, and you can just tap around and enter these values. And then if you want, you can turn a search into a saved search. This was already possible before, but it was not possible from within the search screen. So now you can search, and if you want, you can say, well, this search is actually pretty useful, I'm going to save it. So it's more convenient to create saved searches. In iOS 12, what Keep It does is it does two things for Siri. First of all, it integrates with SiriKit for note-taking apps, which was launched, I think, last year. So now you can create a note with Siri, you can view the contents of a text note with Siri, and this is something that I've seen very few apps do. You can also append text to an existing note just using Siri. This is a built-in SiriKit domain. It's not part of the new Shortcuts APIs. This is something that was launched last year, but in my experience, very few apps took advantage of. So it's good to see that Keep It now. It works actually pretty fine, and you can even use the HomePod to make Siri read you the contents of a note. That
when you append something, how do you do that? Do you have to
you
use
have
the
to
name
say
of the note?
You have to say something like add, and then you say the text, and then you say to my something note in Keep It. It's pretty verbose, but it works if your note titles are easy enough. Like I have a
Right.
note that is called automation ideas, and it's easy enough for Siri to understand, but more complex one. Like if you have a note called Mac Stories plans for 28, like it gets confused.
Right.
The more complex than the titles are, the more Siri gets confused. Also, there's support for shortcuts, but it's pretty basic. Like all you can do with shortcuts in Keep It 1.5 is just open the content, open a note, essentially, from Siri. You can assign a custom phrase and reopen a note, which is pretty convenient, but I wish, the developer added more features. I don't know, like saving the contents of the clipboard in a note in the background or something like that, or adding the contents of the clipboard to a specific note without having to use Siri or without having to use the X callback URL, which has also been improved in this release. So overall, I love Keep It, and I wrote about Keep It last week on the Club Mac Stories newsletter about the iOS 12 review making of, and I plan to keep writing about it on Mac Stories in the future. I have a small complaint that Keep It made me think about this, but it generally applies to a bunch of other apps on iOS 12. That Keep It is one of those apps that does not offer a built-in settings screen to discover shortcuts. You actually have to open the settings app or the shortcuts app and pray that Keep It donated one of the shortcuts you're thinking about to the system. This is unlike apps such as Overcast or Pcalc or Carrot Weather that actually feature a built-in screen, like a custom setting preferences screen inside of their apps to show you all the possible shortcuts that you can use. Keep It doesn't have anything like this. It just uses the APIs that Apple provides, because Apple doesn't specifically recommend developers to make a setting screen and give every possible shortcut to the users.
And they don't even necessarily do it themselves, because I know the iWork apps, we were having trouble figuring out what even the shortcuts were, because there's no way to discover them until you use the functionality, right?
Exactly. So like Keep It is more on the default side of how do we implement shortcuts in iOS 12? And the answer is you just go to settings and hope that a note that you recently viewed is available as a shortcut suggestion. I prefer the approach that James Thompson and Brian Mueller and Marco Arment have taken with their apps to advertise every possible shortcut. Then the user can decide, do I want to donate this to the system as a suggestion? Do I want to record a custom phrase? I think that's a much more elegant presentation of shortcuts. And I hope that unless Apple provides a new API or a new settings screen where every shortcut is clearly advertised and clearly presented to the user, I hope that third-party developers sort of come together on a shared template for presenting these shortcuts. So we'll see. But right now, Keep It can be a bit too undiscoverable to see what shortcuts it provides.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I found it frustrating when we're writing about these things, trying to figure out what the shortcuts are, because unless a system has been implemented where it's in the settings of the actual app, like the ones you mentioned, it's very hard to figure out if you've not, if you've got a brand new version of an app and you haven't poked around in it a lot yet, it's very hard to figure out what all those shortcuts are.
Yeah.
The next app I want to mention is Pedometer Plus Plus from David Smith. Underscore has completely redone his watch app, and it's really great. I mean, when you open it the first time, you're going to see basically the same screen that you saw before, which shows you your step count, how far you've gone, elevation, and a little graph of your steps over the course of a day. But there's a lot more in there if you start swiping around. And if you swipe from right to left, you can find a bunch of workouts that you can start from on the watch. There's indoor and outdoor walking, indoor and outdoor running, hiking, and then kind of a catch-all other workout that you can do as well. And he's kind of integrated to an idea that's in his Workouts Plus Plus app, which is while you're doing a workout, the data that you see is customizable. It's a little different from type of workout to type of workout, but there's things like heart rate, distance, steps, pace, all that. And you can customize exactly what's on the screen, so you're only seeing exactly what you care about, which I really appreciate. As well as that, there's audio playback controls for whether you're listening to music or a podcast, whatever it might be. So you can, You can use that from right inside the pedometer app. And finally, if you have when you start that workout, if you turn on the GPS aspect, you can see a teeny tiny little map of where you've been, which is kind of fun. It'll kind of trace your route through the neighborhood as you go for a walk, which I like a lot. Have you tried out Pedometer Plus Plus yet?
No, not yet. It's on my list to play with over the weekend. Yeah, it sounds really cool. I wish that I had access to a beta before because it sounds really impressive.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by FreshBooks. To all the freelancers out there, you know how important it is to make smart decisions about your business. Our friends at FreshBooks can save you up to 192 hours with their cloud accounting software for freelancers that's ridiculously easy to use. Here's how they do it. By simplifying tasks like invoicing, tracking expenses, and getting paid online, FreshBooks has drastically reduced the time it takes for over 10 million people to deal with their paperwork. I want to talk to you a little bit about invoicing today. Invoicing is a chore, but FreshBooks makes it super easy. They take the pain and guesswork out of the process. An invoice is incredibly simple to set up and send to a client. But best of all, you can actually tell if it's been seen. If the due date passes and you haven't been paid yet, you can go in and see if someone has opened it. And if they haven't, maybe it just slipped through the cracks and it's time to follow up. The other nice thing related to invoicing is that FreshBooks can do the follow-up for you. You send the invoice and FreshBooks can send out an automatic reminder if you don't get paid on time. It eliminates the need to set reminders for yourself and set aside time to chase late payments when you should be getting back to the work at hand. So, if you're listening to this and not using FreshBooks yet, now is the time to try it. FreshBooks is offering an unrestricted 30-day free trial for listeners of this show. No credit card is required. All you have to do is go to freshbooks.com/appstories and enter App Stories in the How Did You Hear About Us section. That's freshbooks.com/appstories and enter App Stories in the How Did You Hear About Us section. We'll include a link in the show notes too. Thanks so much to FreshBooks for supporting the show.
I want to quickly mention Drafts version 5.4. So Drafts is the app that I used for writing my iOS 12 review, and it's the text editor I'm now using to publish any article on Mac Stories. And I think we talked about this in the episode of App Stories Unplugged that we shared with Club Mac Stories members last week. If you remember, you can find it in your downloads page on macstories.memberful.com. It's episode 3, all about the iOS 12 review and 3 years of Club Mac Stories. I've been using Drafts as my text editor because I replicated all the old workflows that I used to have in editorial years ago, over 5 years ago. I finally recreated them in JavaScript in Drafts 5. The new version does a couple of things that I really like. So there's separators for actions. So if you have an action group, you can now separate multiple actions with visual separators. It sounds like a small thing, but if you live in Drafts, if you spend hours and hours writing in Drafts, having a better organization of your actions in a group really helps from a visual standpoint. There's shortcuts integration in iOS 12, of course. There's a variety of shortcuts that you can set up for Drafts. So you can open a workspace with the Siri phrase, which is really cool because you can jump between different modes of working by opening a workspace. You can tie a specific action group to a workspace. So for example, I had a workspace for the iOS 12 review and an action group dedicated to that workspace, but I also have a workspace for note-taking, and I have a different action group that I want to use for that workspace. And with Siri shortcuts, I can jump between these workspaces and load specific action groups just by using my voice, which is really cool. Also, you can capture the contents of the clipboard with the shortcut in the background without having to open Drafts. This was possible before with the extension or with URL schemes, but I prefer the way that it's done with the shortcut because it works either from the Shortcuts app or from Siri via voice, even from the HomePod. Whatever you have copied on your iPhone will be saved in Drafts. So I think that's pretty awesome. There's a bunch of other changes that I really haven't had the time to play with, but we had a review by Tim Naham. Oh God, how do you say that? Tim Nahamuk. This is a joke from an episode of Connected. It's a very difficult last name. I'm sorry, Tim. But Tim, I'm just going to say Tim has an excellent review on Mac Stories of the new version, which includes, among other changes, new WordPress integrations. So you can publish articles on your WordPress blog, and you can do so either with a visual action, or you actually have a WordPress object in JavaScript that you can go crazy and script manually yourself.
Oh.
So I need to look into that, because right now I'm using the native integration in Shortcuts, which used to be Workflow. It's still working really well, and I love it for a couple of reasons. The integration by Apple at this point lets me search my existing categories and tags on my WordPress site, so that if I want to tag a post, I just need to search, and there's like a visual picker. I don't think this is supported in the drafts version, but maybe you can build one yourself, and maybe you can make it pretty yourself with a custom UI in JavaScript. So we'll need to play with that and see what it's like. But overall, if you're a drafts user and you're in iOS 12, play around with the shortcuts for workspaces, and definitely check out Tim's reviews on Mac Stories for version 5, which was the big one. And he explains this whole idea about workspaces and like drafts as a modular app, which is a really fascinating concept that I've been trying to implement myself. And version 5.4, which we also have a smaller article about with all the changes.
All right, that sounds really interesting. I'll have to check out those changes. I just downloaded it the other day and haven't had a chance to really dig in yet, but Tim did a really good job of explaining it all. The last app that I want to cover today is Halide, I guess.
I have no idea. I'm sorry.
All right, you're not going to help me out here, are you, Federico?
No idea.
It's a pro camera app that has a lot of manual controls, and it's really, I think, become, in a very short period of time, one of the premier apps for that sort of thing. And with iOS 12, it's added some interesting features. One thing that they're doing is they're taking advantage of some APIs that have been improved for true depth photography. So you can take a portrait picture in Halide just like you can with Apple's own camera app, but there's a twist, which is they are doing their own type of background blur. They've got their own algorithms for doing that, and it's different than Apple's. And whether you think it's better or worse or what, that'll depend on your own taste, I suppose. But they're doing something different there. And one of the things that they're also able to do with some of these new APIs and I think they're using Metal for a lot of the app too as well. They're using less CPU power than they say even the Apple camera app, which is kind of remarkable because that's the built-in app that has all the access to the private APIs. And the advantage of using less CPU power is it uses less battery. So you're able to get more shooting done during the day. One of the things that has been added with shortcuts, though, is really clever. And my favorite shortcut that they've implemented is the ability to fire off the shutter, because the Apple Watch has had a little remote for firing the shutter of your camera on your iPhone before. And that's really nice. But to be able to just ask Siri to do it is even better, because you don't have that process of tapping the button on the screen and wondering, did I just tap that too hard and jiggle my camera too much, my phone too much, and create a blurry picture? You can do it with your voice, and it works very, very quickly. And we've got in our roundup from last Friday, you can read a little bit more about some of the details and see an actual GIF of that Siri command in action. I really like that.
Yeah, this is very cool, and also on my list to play with because I just didn't have the time. All right, so this is the second part of our iOS 12 app coverage. We're not sure yet if we're going to do part 3 or if we're going to try and do Mac apps somehow with me and John. We'll see what happens.
Maybe we can always mix them together. There's nothing wrong,
Federico.
Oh,
that's a good idea.
You can be like me and work a little bit on both. It's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that.
All right. We'll see what happens next week.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to stop. And I'm sure that everything that iOS 12 has brought us and all the new apps are going to keep us busy on App Stories for a long time to come. I want to thank our sponsors FreshBook and Eero for making the episode possible. And you can find me and Federico over on MacStories.net. And check out Club Mac Stories because we've got just a little time to go on our special deals for the 3rd anniversary of the club. We've got hundreds and hundreds of dollars of discounts that are available exclusively to club members. So if you're not a member, check it out, see if there's something there you like, and maybe consider joining. We'd really appreciate it. You can find Federico too over on Twitter. He's at Viticci, that's VITICCI, and I'm at John Voorhees, JOHNVOORHWES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.